I'm teaching physical computing, but I also have a digital art practice, and I will be mostly talking about that today. So I will have a short talk about how I got started and what kind of tools I'm using. And I want to look at some key elements in depth, and hopefully it will inspire you also to make more art for the web. So I've been making one artwork a day since the 1st of January 2015. That will make today 1,249 days continuously making at least one thing a day. I still need to make today's one, but I'm sure I can manage. So how did I got started in doing this daily? It kind of started with having this obsession with geometry. I have a background in graphic design, interaction design, and grid structures, aligning things, kind of got programmed into me. And I think, I'm really obsessed with aligning stuff good, and I like flowcharts a lot. And when I was younger, I always liked to create a lot of stuff, also physical stuff, but having time to kind of make something more artistic for yourself, you don't often get that much time to do that when you are working. So I kind of started with this program, and it is a drawing program called Hexels. It's been around for a few years now. And I kind of started making drawing images with this program. It has a grid base where you can draw on. So that made it already much easier than making a grid in Illustrator or some kind of other program. And also started making animations that I was interested in doing. Slowly, when I was studying interaction design, I learned some programming, and I've built websites before. But during my studies, it was not really my focus, but I always had this interest in making visual, artistic things with programming. So in 2014, I came across this Skillshare class from Joshua Davis, and he created Hype framework. It's kind of a framework for processing. I will explain processing later. And it somehow made it easier to get in and focus on making visual art with programming. So in 2014, I was kind of starting to make new stuff, make stuff for myself, exploring how to make patterns with simple shapes and animations. And I really like having this process, iterating on certain elements and kind of exploring what you can achieve with really small things. It was also hard in the start to kind of know when things would be perfect enough to kind of show it to other people. So slowly I started to use a Tumblr blog to post some things online. But still, it would take a lot of time. Is this good enough? Should I show it to the world? So I came up with a challenge for myself to kind of break out of making something perfect and have to show it only when it's perfect. So in September 2014, I set the challenge, well, let's just create one thing each day and I'll post it on my Tumblr and some other social media. So again, it was mostly focused on making patterns and small animations, geometric animations, looping animations, And yeah, that having this daily deadline really forced me to, losing that of the value of giving something, oh, it should be perfect to show it. So it changed my mind to see it more as sketching, what a lot of artists do, drawing in their sketchbook. I just use digital programs to sketch. So there are more sketches than being this amazing finished product of artwork. So I managed that, and slowly it became easier. In October till December, in the end, I was still exploring a bit, more experimentation, but yeah, not every day. It was most days, but I had a little bit more relaxed time, a few days. But I really like to have that challenge of 1 month and really forcing myself to do it daily. So then the 1st of January 2050 came, and I always love 1st of month and 1st of the year. So I said, well, let's see how long I will be able to continue. And I thought maybe a few months, maybe 6 months, that would be probably the maximum I can think. And also had this idea in the start that probably after 6 months I've done everything already and there's nothing else to explore and I know how it works. But yeah, you never stop exploring. So let's go a little bit deeper, the things that I mostly explore in my daily art practice. So as you've seen, that are patterns, repeating elements, making complex structures. And sometimes they look really complex, but sometimes also a bit more simple, a bit more ordered. Then it's kind of similar as the patterns, but then breaking it into small shapes that are generated. And again, sometimes they are more complex, sometimes they are much more easier, different kind of structures. And the third thing that are animations, and they kind of are moving shapes or moving patterns. They should always be looping and just having a small movement, creating something mesmerizing. So that are kind of the 3 areas of what the output is. But I also explore tools with making these things. So the most I make use of is processing, and processing is it's based on Java, so it feels a little bit maybe old Java. But processing started as having encouraged visual artists to create visuals with programming. They started already in 2001 with this program, and there's a big creative community. So Hype Framework is a framework for processing, makes it a little bit different to create patterns and visuals. Hexel's just the drawing software. Sometimes I've been using P5JS. P5JS is also from Processing Foundation. They created a few years back to encourage also more creativity on the web. And next is Open Frameworks. And Open Frameworks is C++. Often used also for more high-end visual generated installations or computer vision kind of things. one of the makers, Zach Lieberman, he creates also a lot of daily sketches with open frameworks. But I enjoy mostly using processing because that structure of creating things in processing is kind of easier. Output is a lot of easier in processing, in my understanding, in my work. So yeah, I love building structures in processing. Then there are colors, and colors is always kind of a joy when building these structures, building these patterns, and experimenting also with color. I think you see a lot of people making visual art with programming that are mostly black and white. But yeah, I think you can so much say with color. So experimenting with that daily is one of the joyful things to do each day. And the last thing, kind of what we focus on, is the composition of all the elements in animations, but also in patterns and shapes, how they fill the canvas, how they are aligned on the canvas. So all these things, when using code, they get generated by creating rules and playing with these rules. So I want to dive a little bit into specific elements and build up to a more complex pattern. So all my patterns and animations, they have some kind of grid. They have a structure that that the visuals get based on. And we see this grid and structure kind of everywhere around us. It's in architecture, it's in a lot of craft. For example, in knitting, there's a lot of repeating elements on kind of a grid structure. We see it, of course, also in front-end design, web design. There needs to be a structure. And this grid now being generated, so with a few lines of code, I can just fill a whole screen with this grid. So this grid makes it kind of safe and secure to build on. But if we would, now I just telling, well, I want an element on every grid position, I can say also, well, let's do a little bit less elements, but still use the underlying grid behind it. And it still feels kind of safe to look at. There's still that structure behind that you can feel, can see. And the alignment, and being that randomly generated, you always get different kind of composition every time you run the program or reload the program. Of course, the grids makes it already really structured. Using geometric shapes also makes it structured. But, sorry. But if you see here, when putting on a square, it has, again, multiple alignments being added. The square is it's put on a position from the middle, but having, again, 4 corners, it creates another alignment on the grid. So next off is repetition. We see with the previous one, repeating just a simple element, what was a square, and kind of having It's kind of a safe, relaxed shape. This one, a triangle, is a bit more pointy and makes it already a bit more energetic. But repeating a same element, we kind of understand what we are looking at. And it's just a small shape that's being repeated. And it gives already a more interesting look when you only show a triangle. But when you repeat it, it makes it already interesting. But being aligned really the same way is a little bit boring. So if we could add another rule, for example, rotating. So I just say to my triangle, just put it on every grid position, but rotate them randomly how you want them to rotate. You get another structure and a more interesting structure. And it's kind of the same also, interesting to breaking these structures that you see. You still see the grids, but it becomes more interesting. You still see the simple shape, but being that aligned differently, you kind of start searching with your eye to interesting elements. So this is all with just one shape, but when adding a few more shapes, we already start searching more in the whole visual, what interesting things are generated, and it's also using these just programming and using code to generate these things. Every time it's differently, but I also wouldn't know how to just put these elements on a canvas myself by hand. So a lot of surprises comes, and with these shapes, I'm just using a square, a circle, a plus sign, and an X, a cross. But if you can see, there are some shapes that are getting combined. So new shapes, even when using 4 of the same shapes, new shapes are getting generated and makes it also interesting. So what I said earlier, color is one of the interesting things also to play with. And you can say a lot of things with color. So black and white focus more on the shapes and on the visual composition. Adding more color makes it a bit more playful. Also, generates, again, interesting structures together. So when using blue and green colors, it's still quite calm and works also well with the grid. But we can also use a bit more energetic colors and a bit more in contrast to each other, like these colors, yellow, orange, still white in them, and pink. And even sometimes shapes are getting combined with different colors and sometimes with the same color. And you get these interesting clusters of shapes. So we're already getting a more energetic kind of visual than when we started off with having this grid structure. Another element another rule we can add to it is size. So here I just say, well, if you put this shape on the canvas, let's pick out of 4 different kind of sizes. And because it kind of breaks, because there are different kind of sizes of the shapes, it kind of breaks also the grid structure that we kind of know in the back. And you get more interesting combinations. We can do the same with the stroke weight. We can add another element, another rule of changing the stroke weight. And because we kind of know that if something is in front of us, that's more closer to us, and behind is more further, is smaller, that notion of depth kind of also creates here with having these different kind of stroke weight and also different sizes. So it becomes lots more playful and energetic. And we slowly kind of losing the grid, but we still kind of feel safe elements on the canvas because some of them are aligning still quite well. So in my work, I do a lot with creating these rules, and when outputting them, I just have different kind of structures being output. And every day I kind of choose which one is the most compelling or interesting to put online. So it's kind of curating with these randomness. And having this random rule, instead of just writing how everything should be, it surprises yourself in what things are emerging. So the random rules that we had here in this end picture, that was, so when my program runs, it's gonna put an X amount of shapes on the canvas. It will choose a random position on the grid. It will choose one of the 4 random shapes, and then for one of the 4 random colors, one of the 5 random sizes, and one of the 4 random stroke weight. So every time it's different and things you can play with, and there are lots of more rules you can add. And building these structures, in my work, I'm not building every day a new structure. I'm mostly repeating same elements. But you can, when kind of playing around with the same program you write, you can change a lot of things. So for example, we can change some rules and create a different composition. So the only thing I change here is, instead of having a big grid with a lot of small elements, I'm just saying pick one of the 4 positions. I made the shape bigger, but still having a few random size, still a few random stroke weight, and the same colors. So playing around with these elements, it doesn't have to be every day a new kind of thing. It's just iterating a lot on same functions and same rules. And we also see that in the animations that I create, if we have a grid, creating moving elements on a grid, repeating the elements, so it still feels really pleasant and kind of safe and structured to look at, changing just in time how the movement needs to start. So when starts the one thing, the other thing, creating these looping images to kind of also play with again. And for my animations, I often use also kind of the boundaries of the canvas. My animations should always be nicely positioned in the canvas itself. We can also change to a circular grid. So having elements repeating on a circular grid, being a circle makes it a little bit more softer and less static than just using a basic grid that we mostly know. A lot of repeating elements. So again, it's just a really simple element, but having this different movement, well, they have the same movement, but they start just slightly differently in time with their movement. And with the second one, it kind of feels like they are moving to side, but just a simple kind of movement. And repeating that makes it interesting. Also playing with different kind of shapes, more round shapes, weird shapes that being created, or just a few lines. And with the third one, it's also the not only the line itself, but also the space in between that creates something. And of course, also playing with this animation color is really fun to experiment with and gives a lot of contrast, also a lot of energetic, and with the yellow on the red one, it almost looks like energy kind of symbols going in the lines. So it's exploring these elements, playing with them, it's just giving you time to explore with these small elements is interesting. And when I started, I would move a lot of around. When I start exploring, I would start exploring really different things. But slowly, when after a year or something, sometimes I want to use more specific kind of things often to see what I can achieve with them. So having that challenge of doing that daily, I also adding small challenges in between. For example, having the challenge to use the same color. And it's interesting to see when you use different kind of shapes, what color can do, but also what the shapes will tell instead of having different colors every time. So small iterations, sometimes it makes it easier to, of course, use your previous codes program you've written the day before, but also focusing sometimes on just exploring the movement, also the positions of the grid. It's nice to kind of see also getting more focus into when you are doing this almost daily. So this year I started with mostly doing kind of monthly focused iteration. So really diving into a specific theme. In May this year I did just use simple shapes and putting it on a 3x3 grid and playing around with these elements, but still having a lot of freedom to kind of explore, but not think about the composition. And it's interesting that are smaller grids being created. So allowing yourself to focus also helps to iterate and come up with new things. As I mostly use processing, I find it also interesting when I have the time to explore new tools. And for example, if you're an artist and you have a paintbrush, but then you paint with a different brush, you get a different kind of feel to your art. These are created in open frameworks, and learning open frameworks, different elements, you explore again different elements. So changing your tool sometimes really helps to come up with new kind of styles. It's also kind of hard sometimes because new starts are ugly. And these are the first 3 animations I created in 3D shapes. And I really love focusing on creating 2D kind of visuals and elements, and especially 2D animations. But I knew that someday I would start exploring how to use 3D, but never came around. And last summer I thought, well, let's just start and we'll see what kind of things come up. And it's also good to kind of start with something new or a new thing, because it makes you uncomfortable to explore. And there's gonna be new rules you need to explore. So there are gonna be new features. These were maybe 2 weeks after the first ones going into 3D. So slowly you are starting to know what you need to know. And one of the important things is light. So playing also with light in these 3D objects makes it, it makes a new feature to play with. And of course, in 3D, we have new dimensions to play with. Again, we can use that grid, that repeating elements in a different dimension, and exploring these elements in there, changing size again. But still using these simple shapes of cubes, but creating more complex, interesting structures. Also changing your new tools or new features. It gives you new ideas, and you come up when exploring with new kind of visuals. So these are just a few cubes that are moving, but because there's also light, we can, we see new structures being emerged and new shapes. And they are just simple boxes, but as a whole, it looks interesting. It's also about breaking rules sometimes, because I like structure, I like grid. It's really hard sometimes to get out of this. For example, the first one, it's kind of hard to create animations that are flying out of the canvas. The second one, having multiple grid structures not aligned and moving weirdly. And the second one is in open frameworks and using noise function. And because it uses noise, it's a bit more organic, but it's also not looping perfectly. So there's a kind of stop somewhere when it's repeating. So it's good to be conscious about your rules and break them as well. So it's all about playing with rules, with structures, playing around, iterating. And I want to show you the video of last year of all the things I year. And you can also find of 2015-2016 online. But see what you find in this video in these structures. What I told you, see. Should start. No. Just testing a video today, but So I hope that you're all hypnotized by now. So what I want to say, the last few things, I think we need to allow ourselves to play more, experiment more, play, of course, a lot with programming and code, explore more and experiment more. And I think also the web needs more art, so please make more art for the web. Thank you.
That was amazing. We actually had a question come in, well, not a question, but right at the end saying, I am hypnotized, you took control of my brain.
That's a world plan.
How long each day, roughly, do you spend on each
I think mostly when I started out, it took a lot longer, so around an hour. Now being focused, sometimes I can make it in 10 minutes, a new one, if I'm too tired of the day. But yeah, roughly around 30 minutes I spend most of the days. And when I have more time, on a Sunday or something, I will spend a bit more time to kind of explore something new.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can see when you sort of have a new idea and then it goes off for the next few days. Lots of people are very, very keen to see some of the code. Is there any chance you could show them roughly how it works, or is it, where could you point them to if not?
There's this website, Open Processing, that has a lot of processing sketches, and you can search for me, I guess, or ask me on Twitter, and we'll post a link to Open Processing. I hope I will have a bit more time in the summer to make more tutorials on creating these things, and hopefully I will do that with P5JS is the plan.
Cool. It's just so many questions coming in, just saying how much they love this, so it's fantastic. Can you elaborate on the tools you use a little bit more with this?
Yeah, so most of the time it's processing, really my focus, and I don't know if I can tell more. I love to do more with P5JS, but it makes it sometimes difficult to export them. So I use, just processing a bit easier.
And are you able to bring any of this stuff into client work?
Yes. So sometimes when I do visual design or brand design, I start generating images and shapes to use them. I also trying to for making these things more physical. So I laser cut also shapes and make them more 3D dimensional. With wood, and hopefully I was starting to do a project this summer to make with someone who's gonna do music and make a more immersive space with shapes around you, but really being all around.
That's amazing. I once saw someone doing, it was like a live coding music thing, so that would be really cool. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think we've run out of time, unfortunately, but please give a huge round of applause for Saskia.